Welcome back to Tech Visa. This is episode number 19. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for all the latest in Australian immigration news. So today we're going to do something slightly differently. We got our general manager, Emily, back on the mic today. And we thought we'd take a look at the most frequently asked questions from you guys that we've received over the last few weeks. So we've got a list, we've compiled them. We've got some nice in-depth answers for you guys. So Em, let's kick things off.
Nice. Thank you, Zach.
So one of the most frequently asked questions would be surrounding the 482 visa and the pathways to permanent residency through the temporary resident transition stream. So as we know by now, this period has been reduced from 3 years to 2 years. But Em, we've been getting a lot of questions from short-term 482 visa holders as their visas expire after 2 years. So they become eligible to apply for permanent residency after 2 years. So what happens for those visa applicants whose visas expire after 2 years, but they want to apply for permanent residency through the 186 TRT stream?
Great question, Zach. And it's definitely one that we're getting a lot more inquiry through. There's been some in the sort of industry, like people advising on their website to saying, oh, the department has policy where they accept where it's a few days short of the 2-year validity. So to clarify, the key requirement is you have held a 482 or multiple 482s for at least 2 years working for the same sponsoring employer. So let's say a scenario could have been someone was outside of Australia as a recruiter, got a 2-year visa, spent 3 weeks to come to Australia. Therefore, they physically couldn't have started working for that 24 months or 2 years requirement. During the COVID concession period, when it was the 186 TRT, there was 23 months was sort of the leeway that the department was willing to accept, but that policy is no longer in place. The current policy that's in place is the wording that says they will accept it in, case by case when it's a few days shy. Because we're getting a large amount of inquiries, we wanted to go back to the policy of the employer-sponsored team at the department, and we did get clarification. But it's not something we want to use as a blanket rule for people doing it themselves. But the policy guidance that we received back from ESPD is they said it would be accepted case by case, where it's less than 4 days short of hitting 2 years. So that would be a scenario where someone was already with the business, maybe as a working holiday maker visa, then transition from a working holiday visa to a 482 without any downtime, would have worked on the 482 for all that 2 years time, and then you lodge sort of for the 186 TRT just before the expiry of the
Okay, so around 4 or 5 days before your 482 visa expires?
4 days or less. It's the way we're going.
Okay.
Yeah, with that policy guideline.
Okay, good insight. Noted. Thank you. And we've seen certain states and territories issuing invitations for the 190s, 491s.
Yes.
What have you seen come across your desk recently?
That's really good. I think, Zach, when we last caught up, we were saying that the General Skill Pathway Program, the 189, which is through the department directly, or the 190, which is through the states and territories, wasn't as great or big in the terms of numbers as they were the last financial year, which ended in June of 2023. But with the amount of allocations that each state and territory has been given, Victoria has been very consistent with their 190. So it seems to happen every 2 to 3 months. We have some tech professionals. But for tech roles, the benchmark is still pretty high. We're looking at over 100 points, which is pretty difficult. And similarly for other state and territories, obviously Victoria and New South Wales have the most amount. So they had, I think, between them a little over 5,700. But the focus really strongly right now is on education and healthcare sectors. So for those that work in those specific sectors where you're in or outside of Australia, I highly recommend you exploring those options, speaking to us or speaking to people in your network to kind of understand. The key thing to remember with the health professionals, most health professions are registered by APRA. So that's your allied health, your GPs, your nurses, your pharmacists. So be aware you need a skills assessment and sort of APRA registration to be able to be eligible for the skill program. So it's not as easy as just calculating your points and going, away we go. And I think New South Wales focus is mainly on the 491. They've made it really clear, I think, towards the beginning of this year that they want to target the New South Wales regions to be able to get as many people in that program as possible. Canberra has a round of invitations for the 190 today. So hopefully there'll be some invitations received by others. For Western Australia, which is obviously a large bit a client base of ours as well. That program for the Western Australian government has closed already for this financial year, which is a bit disappointing because we only kind of like a little over halfway. But having said that, though, they never got the most amount of places. So it's reasonable they've been able to use all their places. What that means is that don't be disheartened. The program will be refreshed July, August this year. But if you relocated because you thought you had better chance in Western Australia and haven't been invited, it's unlikely to happen until probably later parts of this year.
Yeah. You touched briefly on the focus to regional. We have seen expedited processing times. What has been the general consensus around sort of regional visa applications recently?
Sure. So processing times, obviously, since we last caught up, Zach, has sort of been consistent in terms of the 482. So it's kind of moved up to a couple of weeks rather than a couple of months when we were during COVID. So for a standard 482 or in any metropolitan area for a non-accredited sponsor, it's about a 4 to 5 week process if it's a decision-ready application. We are finding there's delays with, getting police checks from the UK or booking medicals in Australia because there's just big backlogs of that. But in terms of regional locations, I think the biggest point of difference is for the ENS, which is the 186 program. For regional employer-nominated PR, it's now 1 to 3 months is what we're seeing. And obviously it's in light or in accordance with the current direction that the government's processing under, which is this direction 105. Yeah. So that's where all the, healthcare and as well as education, as well as regional locations are getting priority with the government in terms of processing.
The subclass 188, the significant investor stream, that's been scrapped. It's been all over the headlines. What have you heard?
Yeah, so when that program first got introduced, I think the government had a view or a vision for what it was to do. It was to be able to create jobs, have more businesses come to Australia, create job opportunities, and obviously generate economic activity. But I think the reviews from the government since that program's been live has been very sort of geared in a different direction. 80% of all of the expression of interest were taken up by a certain country of nationals and what wasn't really generating the economic activity or the employment. So right now, even though there's like 5 streams, I think, at the end of the 188 program across that subclass, and there's commonly known as A, B, C, D, E kind of stream, but there was the innovative and there was the investment, significant investment. It's all closed right now for this financial year or as far as this year goes. And the government's using the term to say it's under review. So hopefully we'll come back with a bigger and better program to be able to serve the Australian community.
A visa subclass that we were processing tons of at one stage. It's slowed down significantly. It's been up and down. Lots of questions around the global talent visa. What's the latest? What's going on? What have you heard?
So like you say, we definitely reaped the benefit of the global talent visa when it was the flagship program for a while. At Tech Visa, we obviously have high caliber clients that come through our doors and we've been able to successfully get invitations. And it was a very streamlined program. We were getting, invitations within sort of 2 to 4 weeks from lodgement if they were listed with priority by a talent scout. And then visa was normally processed within 3 to 4 months from date of lodgement. So it looks like a 6-month process across the 2 sort of application processes, EOI and the visa. But since the beginning of last year, I think that since the direction changed from 99 to 100, I keep going back to these directions, but that's how the government operates in terms of giving priority and the focuses. But when it changed from 99 to 100, the priority was taken away from the global talent program. It's not saying it's still there, but there's no function to get priority through a global talent officer's endorsement. They are now, the global talent officers are still out there in the world, but tapping people in the healthcare and education space. But if you still meet the key 3 thresholds of the visa sub, so internationally recognized talent and achievements, experience, ability to attract a higher salary in Australia right now, I think it's 167,500 or a bit more around about there, to be able to then be nominated by a business or a nominator that's prominent in the same space that you're in. You're still in it for a chance to be invited, but the invitation process is slowing down significantly. So it's now a number of months before we hear back. And then once a visa is lodged, we've been getting some recently sort of around 7 to 8 months, but the majority are taking longer, probably 11 to 12 to be processed by the government.
Okay. And you did touch on the priority occupations being healthcare and education. Is this across the board with all the various visa subclasses, or is this in specific cases or scenarios, or how does that work exactly?
We're seeing it's across the board. So if you nominate someone for a 482 or ENS visa, or 186 is ENS when we refer to it, is healthcare professionals are getting priority. So that's, your GPs, your nurses, your allied health professionals. Education, we don't work on as much, but, I think that's the way that the government's going, like for those with those specific areas. the invitations for state government at lower points as well. So we heard across the industry, nurses getting at 70, we'd be invited for the 190 at 70 points or 75 points. So it's definitely something that the government's wanting to grow.
Thanks for your time. If you did enjoy this, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye.
Bye.